tabletop role-playing game freelance mentorship, or the TTRPG Freelance Mentorship podcast, hosted by Degradees Radio. I am Crystal Mazur. I am going to be the host for our very first episode in this series called Getting Started Writing. A brief overview of our series is that the goal for this is to help people who are interested in freelancing or curious about how freelancing works. Maybe they are fans of some of the writers for some of the RPGs. They follow them on social media and are curious about what it is they do. Or somebody who is in freelancing already and maybe struggling with a certain part of freelancing or wanting to connect with other writers. And we're taking certain chunks of freelancing and breaking them apart and dedicating an entire episode to them. I will also be doing show notes so that if you are looking for specific answers to questions, we can definitely, or you will definitely be able to search that out in the show notes. So, I am here with the first guests that I have for this podcast series, which is Carrie Poli and Whitworth.
Hello.
So,
Hello.
And just for full disclosure, Carrie is my sister-in-law, and David is a part of the Darker Dale podcast series. So, onto our news section. So. Okay, so in some quick news. First off, Gen Con is coming up. Hopefully this podcast released before Gen Con. That's the goal. Myself and Chig are going to be recording two different panels. First one is Horror in Gaming, where we are going to have hosts from Chaosium, as well as from Odivius and Renegade Studios. And we are also going to be recording a Darker Days Raid podcast episode, and Chig and I are going to be questions, but also going into some other fun stuff on that. I am also hosting or co-hosting a panel on this topic, so the TTRPG Freelance Mentorship, with Pat Edwards, who is a writer that I worked with on both Sirens as well as the Red Opera, co-hosting this panel there live.
I'm guessing there's going to be no coffee various.
Not the form that. Yeah, no, not that specific form. But I've been debating on pixie sticks, just because I want to be Chig's problem.
Pixie sticks.
Yeah, make Chig do some work for once.
He's going to listen to this and be like, man. All right, in other gaming news, Trinity Continuum Aether, which is the Victorian steampunk setting for Trinity, is currently on Kickstarter for the next 20-ish days. If you are a fan of Trinity at all, it is a fantastic Kickstarter, fantastic game, beautiful art, look it up. And then Dave, did you...
Yes. So as Gen Con is coming up, that means we have the and got the voting going out in kind of relation to the Darker Days Radio. Cult Divinity Lost is up for within that category. So the Labyrinths and Secret Chambers book is up for best cartography and best related book. I know last year the best cartography was won by Alien, and that is fantastic.
Yep.
So they're in a good crowd with that one. And also the Beyond Darkness and Madness scenario is up for best writing as well. So Cult. On a side note, there's also one of my favourite games has gone up for Thirsty Sword Lesbians is up for a fair Ennies as well. And we need we definitely need to get that game going at some point, don't we, Crystal?
Yes, we do.
I don't think I've ever heard of that one. I need to be in on that.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's absolutely beautiful game. It's open world, all about relationships, having so much. But that's for another day, and it's not really hot. But also, Hunter 5th edition is now out in PDF and physical copy. And I know that Chris is hopefully doing a review of that.
Yeah, we got to give them time to read it.
Yeah. So the PDF has been out for a couple of weeks. The physical book is now. So yeah, the next in the 5th edition World of Darkness is out and available for people. Go check it out, and we'll have a review for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, so quick time with Gen Con for both of your announcements is that I will be at the Ennies cheering on all of my friends who are nominated this year, and hopefully toasting to them winning. And then also there is a Hunter 5 launch party hosted by Renegade Studios, which is at the same time as the Ennies, unfortunately. But if you are not going to the Ennies, because it's not really your bag, that is okay. You can totally go to the Hunter 5 launch party and hang out with almost every single writer that is at Gen Con will be there. As well as a lot of the other people who write for Renegade. So if you are fans of anybody that writes for Renegade, you'll probably see them there. All right. So I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves first and kind of get into how you got to this point with your freelancing, how you got into it, what interests you, and either what you think your strengths are or even like your weaknesses in it, stuff like that. I'm going to have Carrie go first and then Dave, and then I'll go and jump in last.
Alrighty. How I got here, I'm not sure, to be completely honest. I started writing just short bits, and people told me I was funny, which I'm not really sure if I agree with them or not. But so I was encouraged to write bits, just story bits of whatever, flash fiction, whatever, and I ended up here because people are like, these should be published. I'm like, okay, but I don't know how to do that. And they're like, oh, if you can do freelance and just, either self-publish a book or whatever, or submit it to a magazine or whatever. And there's no real handbook for doing that. Oh, now you want to be a freelancer, chapter 1. So I have no idea. So I wouldn't say I have a wealth of stories that I'm sitting on, but I have a bunch of stuff that I don't know what to do with. So I don't know how to get from like step 1 to step 3. What happens at step 2? So.
And that's the very legitimate feeling, because there are a lot of different avenues into getting in freelancing and getting into publishing, and we're going to talk about those a little bit later. So that is a very legitimate you're having.
Okay, good, because then it's like, okay, well, I could do short stories that because short stories or flash fiction or whatever seems to be the freelancing, you're putting it toward a collective communal publication, or do I need to like sit down and hammer it to something bigger and then just self-publish someplace else? It seems like that's almost like two different arenas, but they kind of have somewhat the same beginning steps.
Yes.
So.
All right. And then Dave.
Yeah, kind of fell into freelance. A couple of years ago, Chris from Darker Days Radio reached out to me to work together many moons ago in Games Work to start the Dark Hammer series Radio. And from that, there was some scenarios within the Warhammer. I co-wrote one, conveniently forgotten the name of, despite it the most popular thing that we've written, the Warhammer Fantasy with the Headless. It's been translated into, it's quite a pop. And that was the first thing I did, and I just kind of fell into, because Chris has the experience having done a community content. We wrote that together and pitched it to 7, and they said yes, and so it got published. I kind of sat there and went, holy, I was never ever expecting this to happen. I was one of those forever GMs who has all the stories that I want to tell. Never even thought about writing them because I didn't really know anything about that at the time. Then being brought into Darker Days, getting to do that with Chris. And then from there, I am now with all 3 of the Warhammer RPG, so Fantasy, Soulbound, and Wrath and Decay game. I have worked with Crystal through Darker Days Radio and Third Eye Games Third Eye Games with the PIP system, and then I've got some through Darker Days Volition side project. And so that's kind of I just fell into it, and from there I went, oh, I've got all these stories and all these ideas. There are ways to tell the stories without actually having to tell them. We can go down. It's been an amazing journey. And from all this over the last couple of really good we can't really talk about on this episode.
Don't talk about it just yet. Not yet.
No, not yet. But I've had 2 good bits of news that relate to slow. Like from my initial burst of writing for Warhammer 7 and content. So there's this initial burst of amazing stuff. Watch this space.
All right. So my story is kind of similar to Dave's, in that I did kind of fall into it. So I'd been doing workshops on using games and comic books in the classroom. I'm an educator by day, and a friend of mine who had been writing in the RPG space for quite some time by that point, was like, hey, I want you to write for this. I want you to write reviews, write, interviews and stuff like that. He wanted to get me writing. And I kind of balked at that idea. I'm like, I'm not a writer. I don't do that type of stuff. I haven't been trained in it. I write and run on sentences. Or stream of consciousness. I wrote in that for a while. Let me tell you, that is hard to edit. I stopped doing that. But he finally sat me down and he's like, hey, I need a scenario for this open source game, which was First Fable, and it's going to be a Halloween scenario, and I need you to have it done by, September 25th or something like that. And you have to save a month. And I was like, what?
No pressure.
No pressure. And he's like, yep, and it's going to be it's going to be published. I have an artist already set up. I also have an editor and a layout person. And yet you're going to have a physical book. And I was like, what? And so, I kind of got shotgunned into freelancing. And now, mind
Welcome
you, I
to
did
the world.
right. I do get paid for that still. It is by sales on DriveThruRPG. However, I do donate all of my sales to Cover Project because of the individual that owns First Fable. There's a controversy around them. And I don't want to take down the scenario because it has brought a bunch of role-playing. But I donate my portion to Cover Project. So, so it kind of started from there. And then the layout person for the book ended up being Eloy Lasanta, who is the owner of Third Eye Games. And he approached me like a year later, and he was like, hey, I have an opportunity coming up. I remember you writing from the First Fable game, and I really loved it. I think you'll be perfect for this, especially since you are an educator, you work on kids, and you have that perspective. I want you to work on this project. And it ended up being the PIP System core book. And I ended up writing it, and I wrote quite a significant chunk. I didn't realize how much I'd actually written for it until later when reviews started coming out of it, and they kept bringing up like the portions that I wrote, and I was like, oh, I wrote that. Oh, I wrote that too. Oh, I wrote that too. And so it was really cool to hear. And then it ended up winning an Emmy in 2018, and I was completely shocked because that had been, at that point, that was only my second project. And so for it to win an award, as it being my second project, was really amazing. And during the Emmys...
Yeah, but it deserves that award. It's an amazing system in book. I think it needs a bit more recognition to what it actually shows.
Well, thank you. I'm very proud of it, and Eloy is also very proud of it. The two of us worked together very closely on a lot of stuff for it, and we want to make sure it keeps going. But during the Emmys, Eloy had asked me to go up with him because I had been promoting the book, talking about it, running scenarios with it and stuff like that at conventions. And he was like, you have been working so hard at this book. I want you to go up and speak with me. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. And we get up there, and then he starts speaking because he's the owner and he's the person that wrote it. It's his baby. It's his idea. And he looks at me and he goes, and I want to introduce you to the lead developer for the PIP system. And I was like, wait, what? And,
Dun,
so,
dun, dun, dun.
and so he shotgunned me
Imposter syndrome.
Right? Yeah. Not that I wouldn't have said no or anything like that had he asked me beforehand, but it was just really funny because that's kind of the relationship that Eloy and I have, is that we kind of like, oh yeah, let's just do this. And then like we go from there to like amp it up into like 1,000 and go from there. So, but that kind of springboarded me into doing a whole bunch of other projects. And my mentality around it, which is if I have the means, I say yes. And that's kind of how I ended up being published so much. So,
Nice.
So that's how I got into freelancing.
So I just haven't fallen into the
And
right
you
hole
now
yet.
have
Is
an
that what's
impressive-
happening?
So, and David, I do. I did not realize how many names and titles are attached to my name until I searched myself on DriveThru, And I went, oh,
Yeah,
there's like two
you have an
pages here.
impressive back catalogue in there. There's like, it's not just the number that you've got, it's the size of those projects that you've managed to get yourself attached. Things like Chicago by Night and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and I am extremely grateful. And I realize the privilege that I have of having a lot of big name stuff attached to my name, which is why I wanted to start this, because stuff happened on a project. I'm not going to talk about it too much into detail on this podcast, but I will be talking about it. I could talk about it in spaces, and I probably will mention it a couple times. Something happened, and people were questioning what was going on. And so I spent a lot of time kind of bringing people up to speed as to what a freelancer actually does and goes about. And so that's where I got the idea. I had this idea brewing for quite some time. I'd had a conversation with Charles Urbach, who is an amazing artist. Name right. Yeah, it's Charles Urbach. He is an absolutely amazing artist. I had a conversation with him at GameholeCon last year about how we've been running into more and more people who are baby freelancers or freelancers who want to get in, or freelancers who are struggling with things and then nobody to talk to. And reaching out on social media gets them nothing, because it's a lot of times it's a lot of white noise surrounding them that it's so hard to get. So I wanted to make something where to go to look for specific things, and that's what I came up with this. I
think what you've done with this now knowing kind of your layout this is going. This is going to be a great resource for not just for stepping up to start, but for people like me as well. Who's in, but kind of then at that point, how do we go and how to, and just kind of giving those tricks about the trade. There's not much out there for freelance, and if you're trying to put your name out there and say I'm a freelance, all these other stories, certain do I want to be involved with? You don't want to be involved in that side. In the so amazing stuff going out there. This is going to be a really good way for learn beyond the I'd say.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the different challenges that each of us, because we are all in different phases of where we are for freelancing, right?
Oh yes.
So I want to talk about some of the challenges and that you are either in the process of overcoming, or you faced and overcame, and how you overcame those, and what resources you use specifically, because I think that putting more and more resources out there is going to definitely help others. So I'm I'm going to tier this, because I want Carrie to speak first, because her challenges I feel are going to be very different than Dave's challenges and my challenges and stuff like that. So Carrie, why don't you start?
Start. Challenges that I'm facing getting what I have done so far out there, right? First of all, is not knowing where to go. I mean, I've looked at Storyteller's Vault and whatnot, and some other places for things that aren't game related, and it almost seems like come here, and there's like a big sign, but behind the sign there's this featureless wasteland. Not that there's nothing there, but I can't decipher what I'm seeing. So you're like standing in line, and you've got your manuscript in your hand, and you've got a couple people saying, yeah, I'll take it, but you don't know how to put it into their hands into the appropriate format. You don't have the means necessarily to edit it, to layout, to graphics, to do all that other support system. I guess I don't know if that's the right term to use, to make it acceptable to the ones who will be in charge of publishing it, because nobody wants a manuscript that has, run-on sentences and terrible spelling, and, you're losing your voice halfway through, shifting perspectives. So it's like, I don't know where to go. The hardest part, I suppose, is actually getting something done. But then, so you get something done, and you're looking at these different avenues of publishing, and it's now, again, it's like another step. Who do I talk to, and how do I get the support staff? And there's nobody to reach out to. Both the two of you were talking about how somebody reached out to me and said, I'd like you to work on this, or I want you to work with me on this. Somebody starting out doesn't have that network to call on, be like, hey, can you look at this and make sure I've got my formatting laid out? Can you tweak this on whatever graphic program that you have, so I can get a good picture for this? There's if you don't have the network, how do you navigate up into the point of actually putting it into somebody's hands finished? or mostly finished. Because I'm sure that once you give it over to them, they're still going to make some corrections. But I think that's the biggest one I'm looking at right now.
Okay. So a couple of things is that some of those answers are going to be coming later on in the show. I've kind of switched stuff around. Show notes to you guys. Heads up. But yeah, I do feel like that. First off, I will say, like you said that layout is a big thing. If you are submitting stuff, usually layout is not going to be the thing they're looking at, and that's because they know that writers aren't necessarily layout people, and et cetera. Like I am not a layout person.
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, weren't we, Crystal? Like layout sucks. Was it yesterday or today? I can't remember.
Well, I suppose it also depends
yesterday.
on what you're. I suppose it also depends on what you're submitting. Like I'm sure that submitting any sort of like short or a game mechanic or whatever is different than like doing a novella or a novel or.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, very much. If you're looking at kind of self-publication and going through indie content and stuff, layout you have to do. If you've been commissioned by a company, then all you have to do is send them a Word document or a Google Doc in the style that they want it, and then they do all that wonderful black magic in the back if it
right. All that.
Yeah, I am very much the meme of the Microsoft Word where you add in a picture and then all of a sudden everything shifts and sirens are going off in the background. That is me for layout. I laid out several. I've laid out several of my community content things, and please don't they are awful. Like they are laid out so poorly because I am not a layout person, and I understand that is not my strength.
It's not just you though. Word is renowned for this. Being a scientist as well, I use we write a lot in something called latex, which is meant to have specific code written into it where you can kind of define where pictures go, and it's meant to be like hard coded into it, and it still doesn't work. He's like, put this picture right here, and you state everything that says it should go right here, and it's like 4 pages later, and you're like, what? So it's across sins.
I will say that one of the biggest things that I do is I'm a very much a visual thing. If I have to write something, I have to visually be able to see it. And I know this drives layout people crazy. I use tables a lot, especially for mechanics, just to even just to like separate out visually stuff, and then I will put it into because a lot of places will have what's called a style guide, and the style guide is what you need to use to submit your work. A lot of times the style guide will have the different fonts that you need to use, the sizes, the indentation, whether you are using M dashes or regular dashes. Are you using the actual bullet point mechanics, or are you actually physically putting a point there? A lot of places will have all of those specified in there, and you have to use that style guide. And the style guide will kind of give you that layout a lot of times.
I think before we go deep into that, I think we can kind of talk about style guides kind of deeper later in other section.
Yeah, because I've written one for PIP systems.
They're a beast within themselves, style guides.
Oh yeah. All right. So some of the challenges that I have currently is that I am trying to overcome my own brain, and that is so hard. I especially with starting with 2020, my brain has just been all over the place, and that I just watched the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, and my brain feels like that sometimes, where it's hard for me to narrow it down to one specific thing to focus on. And so that's been the challenge that I have right now, because it's challenging to be working on projects and not being focused on them. And I know a lot of people do struggle with that. I never had this much of an issue since, except for in the past couple years. So
I can fully relate. I have so many projects on the go. Sit down and settle. My brain is like, oh, this will be cool for this one. And half an hour later, like, oh, cool for this one. And I think
even setting up this recording was hard.
It's like over the last 2 years, we've all had this kind of. We had, obviously, the world went into a shitstorm with COVID, and people started working from home and getting weirdly having distractions at home. Brains were allowed to explore a little without the gaze of business. That's why I started so many projects, and I've got half-finished community stuff going out there, half-finished pictures that I want to throw up there, and it's just like, I get an idea, start something, get distracted, and it's like, ooh, the new shiny. So I
I
can
think we're all
completely
also in like
understand that.
survival mode at a certain level. So like you can't sit on any one thing because you're in survival mode. I think for the last couple of
Yeah.
years, which kind of short circuits the brain. Like you don't want to lose yourself
Very
because some sort of animal. Like gotta pay attention. Gotta pay attention.
Yeah, I had a to go up kilovolt. I was hoping to have it up end of 19. It's still sat there waiting for layout and a final edit. And I fully blame the last 2 years, the world.
You got this. You got this. I've read through it. You've got this.
Yeah, it's just also knowing what Chronicles of Darkness layout is like, and I'm just like, ugh.
All right. So, David, you want to talk about your...
I just put that in there because I just completely. But it does kind of relate to challenges. I don't know how many people into Dark Age my history. I lived in Japan teaching English because that's what you when you're out there. But I luckily, weirdly, again fell into Japan through teaching, and I fell in the visual K and actually fell in the production in Japan, who are effectively Japan's biggest rock group out there. They are, if you know anything about Japanese music, you know it. And I fell into them and translation of lyrics and web stuff, translations of Japanese. And then I was working about a guitarist without going into he passed away, full suicide, massively sought famous in Japan, and is a massive Japanese rock and metal music. And I was asked to translate some of the book that they were producing and write full introduction. And I'm like, I've never done anything like this. I've never done anything. And I'm suddenly being asked to write what's going to be a very, very well-placed book. And so that sort of throws up... This was a very, very long day before I even... It's when you get this supposed acceptance from outside, where someone comes in and go, I want you to work on this. And then you're suddenly like, oh shit, really? That you want me, this thing that is going to be really quite big. I know it's another topic that's going to come up later, and it's kind of that kicks. And you get to a certain point, the freelancing stuff, and you've got enough title behind you that companies then kind of, either companies or other writers to you and go, can you write for us? You're like, you have that kind of mental shock. I'm not worthy. How do I then? And obviously that is something that we are going to my science. But when I got this offer from this music label in Japan, a very big, can you write the introduction to this book for? I'm like, maybe. Shit.
I can try.
I'll try. And the problem was another challenge that as a freelancer will come up if you are doing content is editing. I was the only English speaker, and I have dyslexia. And so you're asking me to write an introduction that I have to edit myself for a book, and I can't spell or do grammar? What?
Oh, this is a good leeway into the next section.
Yes, it very much is. And that's kind of why I put that in there.
So
let's say, as a quick thing, let's say dyslexia does not stop you from doing this. I'm a perfect example. I'm published, actual published, and I have quite strong dyslexia. So
there are
don't worry about it.
Freelance writers that have dyslexia and dyscalculia. There are ways to get your brain to work with everything, and there are actually supports that I'm going to talk about that are built into some free programs because I use these a lot with my students with special education needs and with other sort of reading challenges and stuff like that. So we're going to get into those. So our next segue, yay, thank you, Dave, is
I get things right every now and then.
is what programs or stuff that you need to get started. So first off is that when the gaming industry started, everything was written by hand or typed on a typewriter. And in order to be published, it had to have...
I remember those days.
Oh my gosh.
Dark days. The ancient time.
And it's actually one of the reasons why companies like Paizo and WotC are actually in person. Like they are two companies that are not remote. And they started off not remote because shipping manuscripts across the country, trying to keep them from getting leaked, is extremely hard.
Wow, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
And so they started to, and TSR was one of those two. If you, the newest TSR history book, by the way, is absolutely amazing. It's written by one of my friends, and I'm in the middle of it. Check it out, and you'll see why some game designers are in person. Like they are in groups or at an actual physical location because of the shipping costs and trying to edit a manuscript when you're trying to cross state lines with it and stuff like that is the back and forth it was really, really challenging. And so it started that way. But now that we have things like computers and laptops that are rampant within our society, at least within our country and other more technological countries, we have advantages that
First
others...
world country.
Yes. I hesitate to use first world, but yes, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the first thing is that there's word processors. And the free one is Google Docs. And that's actually the one that I use the most. And that's because it autosaves for you. I am horrible with saving.
Google Docs is because it also saves and it's easy to share.
Yep.
So
yes. It is super easy to share and collaborate. It apparently is not so fun for layout people with certain programs, and I understand that.
No, it's really not.
You can copy and paste into Word, which is what I do with certain specific companies who request that we use Word. I'll copy and paste it because if you just download it as a Google Doc into a Word, it won't format the way you need it to for a lot of those documents. Just copy and paste it, format it into that way, or write it in chunks and copy and paste the small chunks. Whatever you need to do. But Microsoft Word is getting better. I will say it is getting better, especially since they now have that cloud that you can write in.
So like the DocX.
Yeah, it's OneDrive.
World. Yeah, kind of on that same idea. Again, we'll put this later. You'll find that a lot of companies will throw their style guides at you in Word.
Yep.
Because it allows that layout, and it is so much easier to do that.
Yep. You can erase or you can make a new template based off of it. And then the other one is Scribus. So Scribus is a program that a lot of people who write for film scripts or comic books will use because it is highly formatted. I do know that I think Magnus Archives use Scribus too, Rusty Quill. I'm fairly certain they use Scribus too for their podcast episodes for the writing of it. And what it does is it allows for a much easier time to move things around within your document. So like a chunk of writing will actually be its own like post-it note is how I picture it. And you can move that post-it note around a lot easier within that document versus Google Docs. And it allows for easier formatting and stuff like that. It is a paid program. It is, I think, reasonably priced. However, again, I do not work a minimum wage job, so please take that with a grain of salt, because I do feel like there are other programs that you can save up money for later that are more worth your time than Scribus. But if that is something that helps you or helps your brain, definitely go for it.
I've never heard of...
It does have like a free... I think it's like a free week or a free month of use. So you can actually try it out for free for a certain period of time. So yeah.
I think I know like one of the free.
Yep.
But Scribus is something I've never heard before. But if there's something out there especially if you're doing something like Magnus or you're doing more kind of like the live play actual, it sounds like kind of then make that into with that kind of scenario.
And then so moving on is going to be grammar. So every writer needs an editor. Honest and truly.
Yes.
I need about 7.
And it's not because like I teach kids who struggle with writing, and I always say that even like some of the best writers are actually the worst writers. And I've had students who have come up with better stories than I have ever be able to dream of. And so it doesn't matter just how skilled you are in writing. If you have a good editor and you have a good editing program, both of those will help support you. There are 2 that I recommend. The first one is Grammarly. There's the free version. I think this is the one that you were talking about, Dave, right?
Yes, it is.
It has been phenomenal for me. I ended up buying the actual program, and honest and truly, it is worth the money. For me personally,
I am this close to buying the actual, because I now actually have a job and to do things. I am very close to buying it because of aforementioned.
Yeah. And one of the biggest things that it does check for is whether it's passive voice. Yup.
Yes, I have problems with
What
that.
I will say,
Everybody
with
has
the free
problems with
version of
that.
Grammarly, so what I'll say with the free version of Grammarly is it's a web-based. It's mostly web-based. So if you're working through Google Docs or the web-based Word document, even emails, it just applies instantly to all of the things that you will write on a browser.
The
But the
paid
free-based
document.
things, we are seeing. You go ahead.
Sorry. The paid version of Grammarly will allow you to open up in an actual program for Word. So
Yeah, so
like
it'll do it
it'll port
offline.
everything to Word. Yep.
What I found is that because Grammarly has now come out and it's free, this free thing, I've discovered that Word, the online Word and the online Google have roughly checks on them as
Yep.
well. So if you are working with Google Docs, have Grammarly, because then they'll both work together and pick more up, just one of them by themselves. But they are relatively... What Google Docs and Words don't do is that wonderful passive voice that I suck at. So I have Grammarly for that very reason.
The other thing is actually a free website. So if Grammarly is not your thing, you can go to the Hemingway Project. The Hemingway Project will only have a certain number of word count that you can put in there, so you have to copy and paste. But what it does is it checks for passive voice, it checks for clarity, and it checks for grammar and spelling.
Interesting.
So, yeah. It's what I used before I got Grammarly. I used it for several pretty big projects. One of them was over 18,000 words that I wrote, and I went and copied and pasted the entire thing in Hemingway.
Wow.
That was one of the reasons why I went and bought Grammarly.
There are also you can Google if there's something you're specifically worried about within your thing and you don't want to passive check. There'll be little things where throw a send check for passive, but it won't like the. There are ways around it but if you're looking at doing this kind of thing as a more long term, like Grammarly for Grammarly is definitely it's again, like you were saying with Scribus, it's affordable. I feel who has a time, someone obviously minimum wage, it's probably a little bit of what it works at Grammarly on this base.
Absolutely. And then one of the things that I use when I'm getting a team together for a writing project, and I know, Dave, I've told you this to death, but if you are writing a scenario for a specific program, what you want to do with that is to look at every sentence as if it's a story hook. And that can actually help clear up a lot of the passive voice. So,
Yes.
yes. And so taking a look at it that way, it doesn't work quite so well for fiction. If you're writing any sort of fiction, it doesn't quite work that way because passive voice will end up being in fiction in some aspects and some parts of it. But for scenarios and for writing for world building and stuff like that, thinking about every single sentence as a story hook is going to help kind of get you past that passive voice fairly organically. You may not even have to think too much on it.
Yeah, I that's kind of how one of the things within was I was throwing in that part. When you're doing commission for company, quite regularly you don't see final edits come out. And you don't see the change, especially if you're with a big company where they have a lot of editor background. So you give them your scenario, and then suddenly it's published, and you're like, okay, where did that come from?
What are steps two? Like two right in the middle. You got one and you got three. What happens in the middle?
Yeah, I suppose we can talk
That's
about that
for further. Yeah.
in probably the next bit or later on about
A little
that
bit further
weirdness
on.
that happens when you're working for a company. But I had a train of thought.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
Oh, man.
Oh, I derailed you.
Yeah, so passive voice is what we're talking about. Yeah, so if you're looking at content, if you don't have someone who is going to check these things for you, unless you, like I do with Darker Days Radio and Crystal and Chris and Mike and Dig and everyone in there, and my own stuff with the Drunken Storyteller, where I have another check thing, we can bounce things around and understand that kind of passive voice is something that I actually kind of want to emphasize this because it is a thing within it. When we speak, we use it quite a lot. It's how we interact. But when you write, you have to describe things that passive
An interesting.
yeah. It's
Not
a
clinical.
weird thing. Yeah, you've got to be a little bit more clinical. So, Crystal, you said something that I've again completely forgotten. You said, and you said it. It made me think about it as you're trying to. So, like with me when I'm doing my science, and I explain the result I've got. I'm going to be a lot more short, concise with what I'm saying. So, your world building, explain the world as it is, rather than putting ing weird stuff like that. Be more concise writing. Don't think about how you talk to someone about it. Think about how it should be written.
And there's also the "and then there were zombies" check. Like if you can add "and then there were zombies" to the end of a sentence and it makes sense, it's passive voice.
I've never heard that. That's awesome.
You always need zombies.
Oh, really?
No, I've never heard that. And then there were
yeah.
zombies. I gotta write that down. Hang on. Then there were zombies.
Also, if you can add and then there were zombies on the end of everything, it also makes it a million times cooler, but wrong.
I mean,
Well, it's like everything's better with a flamethrower. That's the idea.
yes. All right. So, and I'm going to have a specific episode dedicated to resumes, CVs, and writing samples and what they are. But I'm going to go over really quick, like how to build your resume up, because writing resume is not a traditional resume. And in fact, having it, like, I only submitted a resume once, and it was because I had only one thing published to my name, and Aloy had asked for one. And so I gave him my resume, tweaked it for writing specifically, and like why I would be a good writer and stuff like that. But since then, I have found that having a list of your published content as well as writing samples go a lot further than having like an actual traditional resume. And again, we're going to go over what those actually are in a different episode. But things to do to kind of build your resume up, I'm going to put self-published on there, but not for the things that Carrie is specifically asking for, because she's asking for larger projects. I am talking about things like Lasers and Feelings, where it is a one-page RPG with all of the rules on that page as well as your character sheet. And you do things.
Love this game.
I know, it's great. And so doing things like that, and it's free. The person that created it has it free, and it's an OGL essentially, where you can actually take the basis for Lasers and Feelings and put whatever skin you want over it, as long as it doesn't violate any sort of copyright or trademarks. So
It's
there
basically
is,
like community content. There's
Yep.
it's a Creative Commons license, so you can go off and take the concept, apply it to your own.
Yep. So you can take things like ideas that you have rolling around in your head, spin it for just a one-page RPG, and put it out there. And you can actually publish that on DriveThru.
What's it called?
It's called Lasers and Feelings. It's based off of some fairly well-known Star series that I know that, you totally aren't a fan of, or and then I know that Dave and I touched on community content a little bit. And there is is there really a demand for it? And I will say it depends. Because yes, there is. I do know people who do community content exclusively for their income. And that is because community content isn't just a one payout thing. Freelancers normally will only get one payout for their word count, and that's it. Or two payouts split up between their word count and stuff like that. But community content is anytime someone purchases a product, you get a percentage of it. That is how Darker Days Radio does it, and we have a decent amount of downloads for our products. And so, was there any specific questions that you had about that, Carrie?
Not specifically. Again, I'm so new. It's like I don't know what I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I guess the idea is that I've gone onto Storyteller's Vault, and I know that they've got the Creative Commons and whatnot. But it seems I don't know if that's me or not. It seems like it's hard to search. Like, if you're looking for something, maybe I'm looking wrong place. But when I'd go searching for it, I'd find the company publications, not the I want to call it the fan stuff. But I suppose that's community, like the non-publisher.
Okay.
So it's like, so I don't, so to me, when I go in there, it doesn't look like there's a lot, one, or two, that there's a big demand for it because, again, there's not a lot. But maybe it's, I just don't know what I'm searching for, because when I go in there and I look for, character sheets, or, source books, or fiction, whatever, I seem to be finding only the company. Like I'll find Onyx Path, I'll find White Wolf, I'll find those, but I don't see Bob, or like I don't
Yeah.
know what the, yeah, I don't see any like standalone artist who might only have like two to their name or anything like that. So
Got it. So I'm going to search real quickly here,
okay.
because I want to make sure that I'm saying things correctly. However, I do believe when you search for community content, it's going to show up. Yeah, because so here is the trick with that. Okay, community
Okay.
content is always going to show underneath the publisher. And that is
Okay.
because that is who technically owns that setting, or that
The IP,
the
yes.
world, yeah, the IP.
Yeah.
And you have to
Gotcha.
look, yep, so you'll have to look at the front. So within Storyteller's Vault specifically, or like with DM's Guild, there is a logo that will be on the front cover, and that is required to be on the front cover of all community content. So Pip World has one that has to be on the cover. Storyteller's Vault has Storyteller's Vault like right on the cover. Because I just looked up the Darker Days Radio products, and all of them are under White Wolf for the publisher, but they all say Storyteller's Vault, either the new logo or the old logo when it was published, because there's an older logo, is right on the front cover. So you have to look for that sticker there because of how the licensing agreement works with that. For I hope that
So
clears it up.
there's this.
It does, because
Yeah.
like they're talking about there's supposed to be all this like community content stuff, and I go in there, I'm like, I don't. Did I miss the file? I don't have the secret password. I need the handshake.
It's.
But okay, that
I
makes a little bit
also
more sense now
find
that it goes under the IP.
Yeah, the issue is I find when I branched with Dark Days Radio, World of Darkness, we're instantly in that Storyteller's Vault world. I have recently got very, very involved with the Freely, and they have their own, but it's well advertised websites or drive-through. On drive-through RPG, I've got the page up at the moment. On the left-hand side, you've got a list of major content, so DM's Guild, Storyteller's Vault, Wargame Vault, Pathfinder Infinite. But if you're looking for other systems, if you don't know what their community, you're not going to find it. Despite the fact that Free League are rapidly major, not many works the Free League. So unless you actually know that, makes then though community content very, very focused in a small. So I have a couple of league workshops for the game. There's a few, nothing like we get with, because Storyteller's Vault's well-known Dark Age Free League workshop is not big, despite the fact that it's kind of knowing that these things are out there, and knowing if there's a world, or right, look up the system, and then like say examples of darkness, Chronicles of Darkness will throw you at, look for the name of the game that you're looking for with community content, will throw you at. If there is, not all have the content, unfortunately.
I'm working on
Yeah, I know that
there are
others.
other ways around that.
So then it's just a matter of like, so yeah, okay, I'm looking at the page now. I'm like, oh yeah, there's like this little tiny thing that if I'd clicked on the cover, I would have seen it, but I didn't. So, gotcha. Like, oh look, there's all this stuff
that's
that
the
I
other thing.
missed.
You have to really, really look.
Right?
Really
I'm like, oh.
Yep.
Okay. It was right there underneath my nose.
So, all right. So a couple other ones would be to. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
No, I just hit mute wrongly.
Okay. So a couple other things that you could do would be to write reviews, interviews, or articles for a website. You can even start your own, or you can guest publish. I know that there are websites such as Flames Rising and others that are looking for guest publishers for everything. With your reviews, I will give you a huge tip. And it is that if you do not like a product, that is okay. However, I urge you to stick to the specific things in the game and what you might have liked to see. So always offer an option of what you might have wanted to see instead of that. Avoid
constructive criticism.
Constructive criticism. It could also be considered academic criticism, because you have to stick to what is published, not your feelings. And so if you are looking to be published by a company, let's say, and you do not like the latest thing that they are put out, don't write a review saying that you could have done it better. Don't write a review bashing things. Like I mean like going extreme, right? Like it's obviously you are allowed to have your opinion.
I can think of a few names ping up in my head right now, but we'll not get into that.
If you want some ideas on like how not to write reviews, look at some of the things that are considered woke or in the quote unquote woke. And just look at those reviews. Like if you ever want to be published by that company, don't do that. Because we appreciate constructive criticism, we appreciate ideas, and we appreciate seeing things from other perspectives. We do not I don't know anybody that likes to just sit and get railed on. I don't. And so, or do what I do. Like if you don't like something and it is really, really bad, just don't write a review on it. I have done that for
just ignore it. If you don't like it, don't interact with it. You can always just say no. Like if it's not there was something I can't remember, we were having a conversation. Not every game is written for every person. So
I think it was about Thirsty Sword Lesbians, actually.
I love, yes, it was. Yeah. It's like we were both, like me and Crystal, we were saying this is an amazing game, the way it's written is something. Views out there were just like, no, we just don't get it. We don't understand it. Not every game it's designed, it may not be written person. So don't get offended games because then we see this quite regularly, especially within the world of darkness games. Yep, we'll not get into that, but
all right.
Next topic.
I went down the rabbit hole there. I'm sorry. We'll continue. Let's go into podcasts.
Yes. Podcasts. So another thing that you can do is start your own podcast. There is some startup cost to it, like you have to have a mic and stuff like that. But there are ways for you to be able to do low to no cost podcasts out there that you can just sit and talk or interview or build up an audience that way. Start getting into some creepy things. I'm fairly certain this is how like Magnus Archives started, was they just started to put stuff out there, and then it turned into a huge thing. I keep using Magnus Archives, but that's because they're going into publishing and stuff like that now too, and I'm with you, so
giving them a boost.
Yeah. Collaborations. Doing a collaborative work. So one of the things with community content is that if you go on some of their Discords, because I know that the Drive-Thru-RPG Discord has people looking for community content writers working for what's called commission base. And this is going to come up in my don't work for free thing, because I always say that. But working for commission is huge for community content, and that is specifically because a lot of times it is not done by publishers, it is done by independent people who may or may not have the money to do it.
Right.
And so the specific channel name for the Discord that you can get that information on, because I get pinged all the time, is the Drive-Thru Discord. And I can see about getting a link posted, because I know that the Discord links have an expiration date. But I can see about getting an eternal link for our show notes as well, so that you guys can get in there. But you guys can collaborate and do a percentage of sales for some of those collaborations for community content, and is a great way.
Excellent. So, and going back to the idea that I don't know what I don't know, just the fact that they have a Discord looking for people, those are, I guess, sort of the kind of like the resources that baby freelancers would have no idea to go looking for, because there's no chapter 1, go here. And I understand you can't spoon feed everybody on how to do this, but just knowing where to go to get that edge on.
Yeah.
That's just to get their fingers on the door.
Absolutely. And the other one would be to go to specific publishers' Discords as well. What you can do is reach out there. A lot of times they will post, hey, we are looking for writers, we are looking for submissions. I know that a couple of publishers have already done that. in their discords and various discords and stuff like that. So if you are interested in any of that, I would specifically go there too. And those are places to. Discord has slowly become more and more of a community building place. And if you are not familiar with Discord, that might be something that I end up putting on a new podcast for this series too, because I do believe that Discord, while it has its issues, it's getting a lot better. And if it is a curated or moderated community, it is a very, very good.
Yes.
One thing I will say about Discord is amazing, love it. You can end up being part of millions of Discord and just get lost within them. So Discord is a really, really good way to, if looking people within the community of getting. So there's multiple ones out there, all the independent. It's a really good way to get involved within the be aware that these are international effectively chat rooms, I suppose is the best way. If you don't know what they are, they're chat rooms. If you don't have a lot of free time, you can get very lost very quickly.
I have learned.
Be afraid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The mute button.
The mute button and mute notifications. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Ignore. Yeah. Mute everything. Don't be afraid about. Don't be afraid if there's a really good idea that you've got to kind of go with. Say, for example, what I did when I discovered that Soulbound, Age of Sigmar, Soulbound, having already worked with Q7, I sent them a pitch. And I knew that there was already Discords and things out there, but I'm going to say I'm an old fuddy-duddy. I can't cope with social media and things like that. It's not my forte. So I just reached out. Here's my pitch. Would you be okay? And so don't worry about the fact that you see these millions of games. Discord is brilliant to promote yourself. Go that way. You have to. You can still become so without. Unfortunately, it is becoming the way that and a lot of companies now reach out to. But you do need to pay attention to it if a lot prolific within a group. If you've got a cool idea, you can skip that. Kind of go straight to the company. Just reach out and just go for it.
Yeah.
But Discord is brilliant. A pain in the
All right. And then Creative Commons license. This has been coming up more and more. Specifically, the biggest one that I've seen was with SCP, the SCP Foundation. Which is also a really, really awesome community. But if you were interested...
haven't they just put something out as well recently? I'm just seeing loads of adverts on Facebook.
Yeah, they have an art book out. Yeah, and so the Creative Commons license, what you want to do is you want to look it up. And it's similar to a open gaming license or OGL. And so what you want to do is you want to make sure that you read it through all the way to adhere to those licensing rules. Is Morkborg CCL?
I'm not sure what Morkborg
I thought it was OGL.
It might be OGL.
Okay.
But it's just it was one of those things that I remember. A lot of things they stake when they get released, like Merkborg and another game that I'm not going to say that because I'm not sure if they've actually officially. They say that they come out under a Creative Commons license,
and that's different than an OGL. Which basically means
you can. Yeah, an OGL. So again, what was the game we were talking about earlier, Lasers and Feeling?
Yep.
That's a quotation mark Creative Commons license. And as you were saying, read it because there are many different types of Creative Commons license. What these are basically is you can take the idea and self-publish it through things like Kickstarter
or
to create your own worlds.
Kickstarter.
And so there's a lot of It's an open line with limitants. So
there's some Creative Commons. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I
was going to say so depending on the system or the genre or whatever the world, is that some would let you publish in Kickstarter. That's so that way you can get it printed hard copy and not just like Creative Commons where you can only publish PDF on Storyteller's Vault. Is that the difference?
Yes. So Storyteller's Vault is not Creative Commons.
Yep. So
there's Creative Commons on
Storyteller's Vault.
Storyteller's
allows you to own the rights to it.
Yeah. Creative Commons is something very different in that you can create multiple different types of media. So, for instance, you can create like art books or podcasts or stories or videos because like SCP has like a video series on YouTube and they also have like TikToks and stuff like that, where and the people that create those own those ideas and those videos and stuff like that through the Creative Commons license. However, Storyteller's Vault is a little bit different because you are publishing. It's more similar to an OGL, like what Fifth Ed has, and so there are a lot more laws that you have to adhere to and things like that, and you can't kickstart stuff for community content. That is not allowed through the community content. It's allowed through OGL. So like you can kickstart something for Dungeons and Dragons. You can kickstart something for SCP, which is a Creative Commons license. But you cannot kickstart something for like Storytellers Vault or DM's Guild. You have to publish through mediums that allow you to Kickstarter or any other crowdfunding source.
Okay.
So one of the ways that the one that I know about, because I've had ideas to go down certain routes, is Merkborg, Swedish. It's an OSR role play based in this doom black metal weird ass world, and it's brilliant. And there's been a load of Kickstarters that come out. So we've got Cyborg taking the Merkborg world and running it through Cyberpunk. And basically all they've done is taken the rule system from Merkborg, applied it. So Creative Commons allows you to literally use the same, change the world. Whereas if you're going into Storyteller's Vault, Freely Workshop, you have to work within very, very specific. Creative Commons allows you to push those boundaries. So if you have a system that you really, really like, and one of the things, one word that I know has just come up, the system that is in Numenera that I can't remember what it is.
No.
But it's just come up as a create. So if you like the world of Numenera and you like the way it works, you can then create your own worlds and systems from that.
Cipher system. It's a cipher system.
Cipher system, that's the one, yeah. So there's now a Creative Commons license, or at least it's coming up. I don't know whether it's out or the Cypher is a Creative Commons. So if you like that world and that system, you can then build upon that within your own work. Creative Commons is something that is used quite regularly within science because it allows us kind of say someone's idea is there's this idea that is cool. Can we build upon that, or can we other idea? And that's how we know that there's this really cool idea. We test it.
Okay, so moving on, I think I'm going to add the different licenses because I feel like we could go deep dive into all of those.
All the different variations thereof.
All the different,
Oh,
yeah.
God, yeah.
And there's a lot.
That's 3 hours of conversation right there.
Oh,
Yup.
my goodness.
All right.
We don't want to
submission
bore people
guidelines.
straight away in the first episode.
That's episode 5.
So let's say that there is a company that accepts submissions year-round. So I know that Onyx Path does, and they have very specific submission guidelines. And others will put out calls for submissions. Others you have to kind of contact someone first. And others I'm still trying to figure out, WotC, how to submit for working with them. So some of the things that you can expect for submission guidelines. So first off, when you look at a submission that you're looking to submit, check out to see first if they have a style guide. If they have a style guide, you need to apply it to the writing that you are putting in there. And that is because they are looking for people who can follow style guidelines. If they don't have a style guideline, that's fine. What I usually do is I like to try to lay out things as best as I can within Google Doc so it looks somewhat similar to what the published thing is already. So I will purchase or look up in my archives, because I have a ton of PDFs of different games that I can look at the style and kind of write things out the way that it's kind of stylized, so that I can be clear and concise within what I am doing. If they have a word count, and I know this is something, Carrie, that you were talking about earlier with word count expectations. So if a company says that you can have, and I'm going to use Onyx Path as an example. Onyx Path does have everything on their website, by the way. You can look it up. Please do so. But they ask you for 500 words of mechanics and 500 words of setting or story. And what they are looking for with that is for you to be very precise with your word count. If you can get to exactly 500 words for each of those, that is a bonus. Do not go over. Do not go over. And what they are looking for is for you to take the things that they give you and make something that is dynamic. And I'm going to say dynamic because it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. What it does have to show is that you are able to follow directions, that you are willing to challenge yourself, and that you are able to take direction. In other words, if for instance you do happen to get feedback on something and you submit again, take the feedback that they give you, apply it to your writing, and submit from there. Companies are going to have very, very different expectations across the board. One company may want you to do exactly 500 words. One company may want you to do 2,000 words submission. That's a huge submission, by the way. Like, it's a lot to read through. But basically, they're looking for you to looking for you to come up with something brand new or something in a setting. It's vague for a reason. And that is because they don't want someone that cannot be creative with what they are given. In so much as if you ask for a very specific box, okay, for a writer to write in, you are not going to get a lot of differentiation when it comes to ideas within that box.
Right.
And so they are looking for you to be able to take these and condense your ideas down to a very small word count, your mechanics down to a very small word count, because 500 words for mechanics, you go through that real quick. Like, a lot quicker than you realize with fiction.
It doesn't seem like a lot.
It does.
500 words is. I will tell a story once we've gone beyond this about 500 word counts and why guidelines. Yeah, 500 words is not much.
Nope. And so what they're looking for you to do is to be very clear and concise with your ideas. Have an idea that is either interesting, new, or challenges expectations. Mechanics should be clear. They don't necessarily have to be perfect, but they definitely should show some sort of cohesive thought behind them, and possibly even giving reasoning. So if you've ever looked at like D&D spell mechanics, they are very narrative in their storytelling when it comes to casting that. So if you can tell a story within your mechanics built in, that's all the better.
It's role-playing. So, that's what you need.
Yep.
That's how I work with it.
And
yeah,
so that's kind of why they're so vague. So, all right, Dave, go ahead.
So, 500 word limit. These are a special. Age of Sigmar, Soulbound, the RPG. If you buy the GM screen, it comes with a booklet of a load of scenarios within. These are all 500 word scenario, and what we got was basically me and Chris are both within this. We have both published with 2 scenarios within GM's. What we got told when we did this was 500 word scenarios, and we were given a city, or we were given we were given a city within the setting of Age of Sigmar and told to write a scenario. Nothing more than that. And if anybody knows anything about Warhammer Age of Sigmar, well, there's a lot of shit happening in that world. And if you just say, here's a city, tell us a story, well, there's over 50 different factions within the game, like the tabletop miniature games, Age of Sigmar. I'm going to say 50. I may be wrong. It may be less than that. But there's a lot of factions within the game itself. And yes, you may be given Hammerhall, which is like the biggest Stormcast Eternal City, holy city within the realm of humanities, within the Age of... But within there, every other faction is acting. When I looked at this and I got given the city that I was working, I went, how can I work and tell a story that is different or everything else that Games Workshop have ever put out about this city? Can I expand upon the lore that they've already and also create some? So you need to, when you're putting these pictures forward and understanding the guidelines, one, you need to know the world that they're working with. If you want to put a pitch forward for a game, you obviously need to know the world that they're working, but then you also need to know how you can mess with that world within
how far
the
you can push
confines
it.
of that world. How far can you? And I pushed it to a point where both Soulbound and the Wrath and Glory game that I did, I pushed it to a point where I didn't think they'd say yes to certain things. Well, I knew Cubicle 7 would be okay with it. Games Workshop had to sign off, and I was like, oh, I'm saying things here that they might not like. But it came back, and we'll talk about this later. Most of what I said was okay. But a lot of the wording changed, and I've added something about expecting to change. So I've got some really good. I got my ideas out there. They actually happen, not in the way that I really wanted them to, but then you have to have that kind of. So the guidelines are vague because they want you to build these wonderful stories, but also for you to understand, for them to know that you understand the world that you're working within. Because if I'm going to go into, let's say, Wrath and Glory, and suddenly like Abaddon suddenly comes out and starts destroying worlds, and that's my scenario for Wrath and Glory. Abaddon comes out and he's like smashing worlds up, and you have to go and kill Abaddon Destroyer. Like, well, he's a major character in the world. Why are you destroying that? You have to understanding the world, I think.
Yep. So does that kind of help, Carrie?
A little bit. Kind of. I have it, and I have no idea why this eludes me as badly as it does. In regards of like where to go and how to go about it. I had another thought there, and I immediately just lost it. Put a pin in that. We'll come back.
We've got an episode about that in a couple of weeks.
Well, you know where to find me.
Well, if you're looking for where to find submission guidelines, you can always look at company websites. A lot of times companies will also have stuff on DriveThruRPG as far as how to submit stuff. They might have something on there or a document, anything like that. You can reach out to the company. Like, you can, a lot of times they'll have like, hey, email the company.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Yep, just
Do
ask.
not ever be afraid to ask. Like, if you know somebody who's also written for them, so if you are looking to write for Because of Darkness or something, you've got email Crystal. Crystal knows what to do. She's written for everything. She understands the entirety of the world of RPGs. Email Crystal. Sorry, Crystal. Your email box is now going to be full. I apologize.
Right, I'm going to be spamming her every day. Like, Crystal.
You have my cell
like
phone, so you can just text
Overlord.
me.
That's right. I could just text you, but you don't want to exhaust somebody and then be like to dread like, oh God, she's writing me again. I can't deal with her. Oh God, does she talk about anything else? That's just no.
No, that's fine.
No, Crystal doesn't. No, don't worry about it.
All right, so let's say you've gone through all of this, you've submitted, you've built up a resume or you're writing and stuff like that, and now you have your actual first assignment. So what does that look like? Well, so I'm going to be using some titles here. I'm going to be using developer primarily. Developer could also be considered the project lead or the creative director. So it really depends on the company that you work with and where their background is. So I use developer when I'm talking about like PIP system or anything that I'm working with and anybody that I'm working for. So the developer is the person that oversees the entirety of the project. They are the large view person. They are the one that's managing the project. They are the ones that usually have the outline or wrote the outline and have an idea for what they want to see in that project. And they are usually the one that hires on a writing team, okay? Once you get with that writing team, sometimes you'll meet, sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll meet on a Google Meet or whatever. Sometimes it's just you and the developer. So one of the things that I always say, and I got to get better at doing this, is you can ask once you get past the hiring point who is going to be working on the project with. And this is for a safety reason. And I feel like more companies need to be a little bit more transparent with this in ways that they are able to do so. So if there are people that you are uncomfortable working with in industry or who you may have worked in the past, I mean, even if this isn't your first writing, ask who's going to be on the project, because once you get hired onto that, you still can say, no, I don't feel comfortable with specific people. You can name them if you want. You don't have to. So ask who's on the project. And then the developer, what they do is they give you the portion of what you're going to write. Now, here is the weird thing about this. A lot of times you are going to be asked to write things that are going to be broken up throughout the book. For instance, when I wrote for Chicago by Night, I was told, write the kindred history for Chicago by Night. So I wrote it. And
That's a lot.
Oh, yes,
That's a
it is.
lot.
That's I can see how that's one section, but also then scattered throughout the entire book. That's a massive ask.
If you look at it, so here's the thing. I'm actually really glad that they did it that way, because I wrote the kindred section, and another individual wrote the Chicago mortal section, like the actual history of Chicago. And that helped to give two different perspectives to the events that were going on, and what events were important to kindred history, and what events were important to mortal history. And
remind me to ask you about Vampire the Requiem and something with that, which kind of relates to this idea that I really need to kind of get on.
If you look at the final product, both of those histories are masked throughout the book. So I wrote this whole one big document, but in layout, it got broken up. And I'm really glad they did it that way, because if they told me that I was writing a history for this section, a history for this section, I would have been so overwhelmed with information and trying to connect with other writers and trying to figure out what worked best for it. Instead, I just wrote what came naturally to me when it came to sticking out for kindred history and the research that I had done with it. I have read all of the Chicago by Night chronicles, as well as most of the Beckett's Jihad Diary at this point. And if you would have been like, okay, you're going to need to write a history thing for this subplot here, and I'd be like, oh, okay, and then I have to try to deep dive into what would fit best. Instead, I just wrote what came naturally, and it actually ended up working so well within the whole context of the book.
It's kind of cool.
So, yeah, it was
that's a really the company approach. They gave you that kind of free rein. I wish I'd at some point had that experience with a little bit more guidance. It's occasionally nice to have that wonderful the developer go, here, remit, develop everything, and then we'll work with it. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work like that, and there are certain companies out there who will just go, no, we want you to do it this way, this way, this way, this way, and give you and basically write it before you've even written it.
Yeah, they just want you to fill in the blanks.
I've not experienced that, but just be aware that I think me and Crystal, we've been very lucky in the way that we have come across it. But then there are certain companies and certain things that are to like maybe they'll ask you to ignore everything, do what promotes them over what. Yeah. But that's a conversation.
Yeah, that is another conversation. So a lot of times you won't actually have like a whole chunk or chapter. Sometimes you will. It all depends on the project and how they're going to be, what's the vision for that project, because Matthew Dawkins had a vision for Chicago by Night already, and he was able to map out how he wanted the writers to approach everything, and he did it in such a systematic way that, you know, to be honest, if you would have asked me at the beginning, and I would have been able to, not under NDA, tell you, you know, hey, I'm writing the Chicago history chapter, and I would have thought that I was doing the entire chapter, and it was actually broken up. I prefer it the way that it is published, because it is gorgeous and it flows so well that it's not dry like other history chapters are.
NDAs are beautiful.
Yeah,
because they allow you to do what you want to do and then not talk about it, because then you don't know what the final product is going to be. It's like, I'm really excited about what I'm doing. And then when it comes out, it's like, actually, that's better than what people who are producing it know what the fuck they're doing.
Yep.
And especially, like, if you're working with someone like Matthew Dawkins, obviously, well, look at his history. If he asks you to do something, you know he's got a plan so just sometimes you have to just go with the flow.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing with this is that word count. And I want to stress this a lot, because a lot of people don't realize exactly what word count is. Word count is exactly how many words you have to type on a subject. And you are given a specific word count. Some companies are a little more lenient than others. I've had it where that there's a very strict word count, because they know exactly how many words are on a page, and they have planned out pages specifically for layout with specific art that they have, that you have to meet those word counts, or it's the layout's not going to work. And so you have to be very, very careful with that stuff. And if you are going over word count or you are significantly under word count, you need to reach out to your developer and have that conversation of, hey, where can I fill this in? Or, hey, I am over and I know I'm over. Can you help me either pare this down, or can you go through in development and tell me what's going on, you know? So those are conversations that you definitely have to have.
I would stress to a lot of the people who only get given not word count within content, amorphous thing. If you are sort of a word count, really have that conversation with the person hiring you about what that word.
Yep.
And about how they want you to approach that. I have been on projects where I have been massive to those counts, and they've said, yeah, if you expand these points and go through that, you can expand it.
Yep.
Been brilliant things. And then I'm in projects where I've hit the word count and they're like, yeah, this is cool, no worries about it, you can fit around this, they're really happy with it. The big problem that I've always had is when I've hit the word count and they've gone, can you restructure you've written and do it this way within the specific structure, because we just structure, and then it adds in a couple of thousand words, and you're like, okay, cool, right, I can do this, but I know it's going to add in words, so where do you want me to cut this? And through personal experience, I've gone through this, I've asked, where do you want to cut this stuff? And I've had no response. Always fight back, get that feedback. If you don't get that back, you're never going to get within anything that you do. If no one's got feedback is going to be doing, then you're never going to get better. So if someone says, well, we're not going to hire you because the last project you did was 6,000 words over limit. Well, I've got emails to you that I asked, how can I fix this? And you didn't respond. Then make sure you have a good. So word count is not just you knowing that there's a word limit. It's you knowing from the company what they mean by that and how to kind of react to that limit.
Yeah, and again, making sure that you talk with your developer about all of this stuff. If something is not clicking with you or not making sense, definitely reach out, because they'll be able to help you. They may be able to help you come up with a tighter outline for your section that's going to help kind of guide you as far as what
100%.
Yeah.
Make sure there is communication. Always communication is key.
A couple of other things. I know, Carrie, you had talked about things like characters and plots and in the story. Can you go through your question for that?
I'm trying to remember what it was that I had in my mind when I did it. So when you're writing for a game system or whatever, how tight do you have to canon? I think is what I'm thinking of. They have these established the words. Established characters or whatever. Yeah, you can't go in and kill the Emperor Undying because that's integral to the world, right? So I mean, how? When you've got this great idea,
do it.
Right. When you got this great idea and you've found, you've consumed every bit of media that they have on this world, and you have found the perfect plot loophole to kill the Emperor Undying, and you go and do that, but it just kind of undermines everything that the universe is all about. Are they going to let you get away with that? I mean, can you do it? I suppose maybe they will let you get away with it because somebody's going to buy it and read it and be like, this is awesome. But can you invalidate a world because you got this great idea?
Okay. So I love this question because everybody wants to do it, right? Everybody wants to try and take down the Emperor Undying because fuck that guy.
Right?
Everybody wants to screw around with Menelaus because fuck that guy. And so here's the thing that I have with that, and some of the suggestions that I have is that, first of all, my experience with that was terrifying, but that's because I loved all the characters, the NPCs that I was writing for. It was Chicago by Night. Because I had interacted with them as a character when I was LARPing and tabletop role-playing. I've interacted with all those characters, so I love those characters. And so fucking around with those characters was kind of like,
it's personal.
It was personal for some of them. And so the way that I see it is that it's, and the way that I got around that mentality is that it's not just me. It is us. And if I do something that breaks the world, it better be for a reason. And if that reason is not in your book, or is not the point of your book, that's probably not the time to do it.
Right.
Yes, you can totally try to figure out a loophole to kill the Emperor Undying. But what I would suggest doing is then pitching something, and we're gonna get into that in another thing too. But pitching an idea on how to kill the Emperor Undying, and do they really want to head that way? You know, like, I can tell you the answer is no, but
Right. I mean, like, because they have this tires thing, and if you just take out like the central key element to it, maybe it'd be a fun side plot for everybody. But like the company at large is going to be like, that's cute. Don't.
and I think that's where fan fiction comes in, right? Like,
I would think so.
I love fan fiction. That's kind of why I like community content.
I was going to say this is very much the difference between community content and pitching an idea to a company who actually runs the fucking world.
Yeah.
So like,
Yep.
you talk about the Emperor Undying as like, someone was like, can we fuck with the meta of Warhammer 40k and actually kill the God Emperor? It's like, no, Games Workshop are never going to fucking allow you to kill the God Emperor of mankind. But in your own universe, if you're doing community content, Games Workshop don't ask you to do, yes, you can fucking kill the God Emperor of mankind and let chaos reign throughout the universe. Fucking go for it. Fuck with the meta. I'm all about fucking with the meta. However, if you are publishing shit, don't fuck with the meta.
Oh yeah, that's. I mean, I assume that like if you were writing a story about killing the God Emperor, that you would definitely be doing that like community content and not pitching it to the boss and being like, oh, you wanted me to write 500 words. Here's 500 words of where I killed the Emperor Undying. There you go.
Yeah, so I think the key here is understanding that level of how you fuck with.
Right.
A lot of the worlds that people work with, World of Darkness, Warhammer, I want to say D&D free, but there is a world within that. You really fuck with that meta? With the picture? Will they accept you saying
that's
God
probably a
killing
situational awareness thing. Like you got to go in it realizing,
So
you need to know the world to know what you can do with it.
We were told that for Chicago by Night, we were told here is a list of the NPCs that we are going to be using. Here are a list of and anyone not on this list, if you want to use them, you have to ask. And then we made a list of who's all died and not coming back, and who's died and maybe they haven't died. And
nobody dies in Chicago.
No,
sorry.
Can we do that with London again, please?
Nobody stays dead.
And so they what
it's
they
vampire.
did was they
No one's technically dead.
Yeah, right. But what they did was they said you have free reign to kind of screw around with these characters, and if something goes off the rails with your writing, i.e., you kill Loden again, or something like that,
again,
just reach out to us and have us look it over first. Chances are you're fine. Like, because World of Darkness is screwed up, and the whole point of like Beckett's Jihad Diary is to mess with that whole perception of there's a linear timeline and everything is the same. No, it's not. So it really depends on the company and how tightly their IEP is controlled and how much of a reign or how comfortable people are within writing within that system. It's all dependent.
It's depending on how much you know about that world that you're trying to write about and how much the company is willing to let you have fun with.
And
there's a wonderful thing that is written within. Because this is the world that I know, and I know how to kind of work within it. Within the Warhammer worlds, we have this idea of everything is canon, but not everything is true.
Yep.
And understanding how to relate those two ideas together. And you can see the same thing within that World of Darkness. Like, everything is canon, but not everything is actually historic. So Beckett obviously has his own stories. Every different faction has their own way of telling that story.
Yep.
And that's kind of the idea that you have to then apply to think, what faction are you looking at? Are you looking at the Anarchs, the Sabbat? Are you the White Tower and Camarilla and how they're applying their Giovanni and stuff like that? How do they view this story that is going on? What story do you want to tell from that view? And then is that canon or is it just their way of viewing?
Is it their personal
And
bias?
as long as you can get and as long as you can kind of get away with the idea of this is just their view, it's not what actually happened, this is their view of what happened, and it fits within the story, then that's a way to kind of throw those really fucking weird story hooks into there. But it's just kind of, you have to know, unfortunately, it's not something we've really talked about, and only through this entire thing that we have to kind of get beyond just that community thing is showing a knowledge of that world and knowing how to kind of work within that world successfully is a good thing. So, but yeah, can we fuck with a meta? Yes.
Excellent.
Can you fuck with a meta and get it published when you're killing the God Emperor? Maybe not.
Unless they really like it's really
knowing
amazing.
Those,
maybe
it's knowing
then.
those lines. Please kill
right.
the God Emperor of mankind.
I'll work on it. I'll see what I can do.
Okay, so quick overview of most of the processes of how things work, and some of these are going to be different for different companies. I've had a different mix of the different steps within the way out there. So first of all, outlines. You're going to get an outline. Every writing assignment should have some sort of an outline that you can follow. And make sure that if you have any questions at that point, you clarify. If it is your first time writing, make sure that you talk to your developer and let them know, hey, I'm going to have a lot of questions. Please make sure you're ready for that. I always did that. I still do that with new projects and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to have a lot of questions. They're going to come up as I'm writing, just to let you know. First drafts. First drafts are usually really, really ugly. And they are never as good as you want them to be. And they always tend to leave things out by accident. And that is because you're trying to get through things and work your way through everything. And there's a whole lot of stuff coming at you with the project. Once you hand your first draft in, it's going to take a little bit, but the developer will go through and do what's called red lines. And that's specifically the term that I use. Some of them use developer notes. Some of them use other types of terms. But basically what it is that it's feedback. And this could be really, really hard to take. Even for me, it's still really hard to do red lines. And I give them to people. So I always give myself a day I look through the red lines. I give myself a day to kind of process and internalize everything and kind of feel like, okay, I am one of however many voices are on this project, and the red lines help me stay within the goal. So I need to look at it that way. And then that usually helps me to kind of focus up and to take care of whatever notes that I have, and address anything that the developer has. Everyone has their own process for going through red lines. I go through grammar first, and then I go through all of the other stuff later. And that's just how I do it.
Red lines.
And then, yeah, red lines.
Red lines are one of those things that if you've done like community content, you've never experienced.
Yeah.
And when you suddenly, it's not something that I've experienced. I've worked with Crystal, the PIP system, big red lines, and so I'm very. It's going back to that very beginning where we had that challenge.
Yep.
I am very worried that when or if where I have all this red line personal that will planning, that red lines will be a thing. It's again something I think I've stepped in things slightly later, is understanding that what you've written is probably try to fit it close to the company want, but is not what want. If it's I think I'll talk about that slightly more. So red lines are they're brutal sometimes.
They are.
From my science perspective, we don't call edits and referees when the referees come back.
Yeah.
Referees can go do one because they're not. They can be particularly unpleasant. It's not a comment about you. One of the things I think about red lines is it's not a comment about you, about how it fits within the world that they're trying, and as long as you separate those ideas in red lines.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, like, I've gotten feedback from red lines everywhere from this is about as perfect of a first draft as you can get to, oh my god, what the fuck happened? And like everything in between. So, like
Giving
you
me
really
paper
have.
nightmares right there.
So you really have to look at red lines as the developer is trying to get everybody on the same page now that everyone has their ideas out. The biggest hurdle is that first draft, honestly, because once it goes into red lines, it's in the developer's hands, and then once you get it back, it technically moves into second drafts. Second drafts are usually where you just go through and you tweak stuff or rewrite sections to fit the voice of what the developer is looking for. And that is okay. That is totally fine. You can't, like, not everybody can be perfect exactly the way that the developer wants every single time when you have 15 other voices on that project. It's just not possible. Like,
If
I
you
don't
look
know
at something
any.
like what you've worked on, Chicago by Night. How many writers of Chicago by Night?
There are
Getting
lots.
getting each of a similar style of writing, a similar voice, a similar way of portraying the world. That's really fucking hard to do.
Yep.
Everyone has their own writing style. Everyone has their own way of wanting to portray a world. And then you've suddenly got 15, 20 people all working on a single project with their own individual idea. That's when you get these red lines like, yeah, that's a really cool idea, but can you write it like this? Because everybody, as you say, multiple voices are cohesive in them. Everyone to be part of that project and showing a story. Cohesiveness, like the key to red line.
So once second drafts are done, usually that's when a writer is paid. And we're going to go into pay and everything like that. But I will say, even if you are new,
Don't
I
tell me
mean,
that.
even if you are new, do not accept anything less than 4 cents a word if you're getting paid per word. And then if you are getting paid per
For
chunk,
those
like
of you in the UK, that's about 3 pence a word.
Yeah, sorry about that. I forget that there are other countries
This is
too. Thank you,
international.
Dave.
No worries. Yeah, do not accept less than 3 or 4 pence, cents, or whatever it is in the currency.
And I'm talking like
always aim
that's
for
minimum.
more. Always aim for more.
Yep, that's minimum. And that's for like companies or projects that you really, really want to be on and you are okay with that. Do not work for free, and I'll get into that later. And then deadlines. So deadlines are really, really important and a huge stressor for me particularly. I am one of those people that I work up until the deadline usually because that's just how my brain is, and it's a jerk sometimes. But I'm trying to get better at it. But if you are going to be over or you are going to be late with your deadline, reach out to your developer. A lot of times there is some wiggle room because they are working with other writers, and so they have some time to give you. But you have to have that communication. If you break down communication and you stop talking or you just go drop off the planet, a lot of times a developer is just going to take that as you're just dropping off the project. So that can be very hard for people, especially if you have anxiety or any sort of social anxiety or anything like that. That can be a very, very hard thing to do. So try to find supports or ways for you to communicate with your developer so that they understand that you're not dropping off a project, you're just kind of falling a little behind or whatever. So we'll move on to pen names. So in this day and age, a lot of people are writing with pen names, and that is because of safety with their jobs. I am very open with my district that I write games, and I write games that are not friendly for kids. I write games that are friendly for kids, and that I've never had an issue with. However, I do not work
What,
in...
vampires not friendly for kids?
Not the stuff that I wrote.
It's all cuddly and fun. Don't worry about it. Kids can love it.
So pen names are a legitimate thing. If you are worried about publishing under your name, you can use a pen name. And I will say this as I am a very much a supporter of the LGBTQ community. Dead names and stuff like that. Please do not feel like you have to dead name yourself in order to publish. Or if you have changed your name in the currently and you have published under a dead name in the past, reach out to that company and see if they can change that for you. Obviously, there are going to be published books that can't be changed on. However, in materials and publications, that is a thing that they can change. In drive-through, it's pretty quick. PDFs may take a little bit longer because those are an editing thing. They have to pull the PDF, edit through the PDF, and everything like that. But please.
But what drive-through can do is when you go through drive-through and you have a list of all, is that link to the author? They can change that very, very
yes,
easily,
they can.
very, very quickly. If you need to
reach out to their customer service.
Reach out. They are fantastic. They are one of the nicest groups out there, and very, very and love them.
Yes.
So much support for that.
So please do not feel like you have to dead name yourself in order to be published. Please do not feel like you have to publish under your name and put yourself out there when all you want to do is just write and have fun. That's totally fine. That is a personal choice. And please know that I'm going to say this as like the RPG big sister. If anyone comes at you for dead naming or for with you at with your dead name and that they're using your dead name, I will have words with because
I will go. I will put myself out there now. It's like I've not done this, and I've put it out there, but I don't think I've openly put it out. I'm non-binary. I sound very male, I present very male, but I'm non-binary. If anyone comes after you, I will fight them. I will literally go up and fight them for you, because I present as a very, very large, strong male, but I ain't. But I also am. So if someone has an issue with you, I'm in your corner. If people don't like the fact that you use he, they, she, they, and have different pronouns, fuck them. It's your life. That's a different thing. Anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, me and Crystal, we got your back. And there is loads of other people out there who have got your back as well. And there's some amazing people in the community who will always have your back. Do not. If a company does not have your back, they're not a company worth.
And honestly, I don't know any company that wouldn't have your back on that, to be totally honest. If there is, I haven't heard of them yet. But like every single company that I have worked with or have had contact with or have friends in, they have been super supportive over changing names, over making sure to use the right pronouns and everything like that. Games are starting to use pronouns with their characters and everything. It is normal and it is fine. And if you do not agree with that or support that, this is not a podcast for you. Sorry.
Yeah, you've clearly not been listening to Darker Days Radio for the last couple of years at all, right?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so before we start to end this, I have a little like advice thing, but I want to ask Carrie and Dave, is there any other questions that you guys have that you came up with throughout this podcast that you want answered?
I cannot think of anything, quite honestly. I think you covered like all the high points. I'm sure that I'll remember something like tomorrow and be like, oh, I should have asked that. But as of right now,
I'll get to that at the end.
Okay.
So, and Dave,
on that, I've not really got anything, and I know kind of the plan for. I know a lot of the might have. Again, if you do come with questions, do get in contact with us. You'll have, at the end of the show notes, you'll have contact. 3 of them, Darker Day.
Yep.
If you have questions, biggest thing, never be afraid to. We've stated it multiple times throughout this episode, even whether it's the writers further along, whether you'd write or ask. And if they're not answered, keep asking, keep going through there. And if they don't answer, then go to someone. And never be afraid to reach out to. I think one of the biggest things that I learned I've learned over the last 5 years. I mean, most people are actually okay. If you ask them to do something, most people are like, well, I'll do that for you. So if there's somebody out there that you have a connection, respect, and you want them to ask them.
Yep.
There's no harm in asking. And if they say no, then, well, that was 5 minutes of your life, right? Never be offended. Always be to ask.
All right. So, we're going to close this off with some advice, and I have some stuff and I'm sure Dave has some stuff, and Carrie might have some things too that, as a newcomer, you're kind of taking into your process and everything like that. So, and that's one of the first things is to hype each other up. Support other creators, share their projects when you can. Back at PDF levels, do the PDF level, not the physical book, unless, like, I get physical books for stuff that I write on, but your shelves will get so full so quickly otherwise. Like seriously, you can still back a PDF or back a Kickstarter at the PDF level for most projects.
Back up PDF because books are heavy and expensive,
Yes.
especially when you're moving country. As someone who's just moved country, PDFs are a fucking lifesaver.
Yup. And like there is always going to be jealousy, but you have to learn to sit with that for a little bit and process that and then move forward, because there are going to be people who get to do cool stuff, such as, write on Avatar. But that is not my place. That was not the, like, I understand I was not the writer for that group, stuff like that. It's okay to be jealous. It's not okay to let it affect yourself and others in a negative way for a long period. Support other creators, back at PDF levels, talk about things. Once you start getting into writing, be very careful about reviews. And this is because if you're reviewing products for a company you've written for, or a product line that you've written for, you do have to be forthcoming on that. And do not review the stuff that you've written for. So like, you will never see a Chicago by Night review from me. You might see me talk about Chicago by Night or anything like that, but I will never do a review on the book. So make sure you're very careful about that. This is a very small industry. I don't think people realize just how small this is. And people talk. If you have been following anything in the beginning of June, you will understand where this is coming from. Because
everybody knows everybody.
Yep, everybody knows everybody and everybody talks. So be careful about how you are saying things and be conscious about that. Never, ever work for free. Working for exchange of services is different. I feel like Darker Days Radio, we have writers, developers, layout people, editors, and we all kind of work for like sales commissions for community content stuff. And so we have an agreement with all of that. Never work for free. But trading skills is, in my opinion, and some other people's opinions, not okay, but in my opinion, it's totally fine. And working for commission is fine as long as your commission is like a decent amount, not like 0.5% or something like that.
I think on that is understanding those levels. We said earlier, it's like accepting that 3 pence, 4 cents per word.
That seems like an entire
it's an
entire
episode.
It is. It's going to be a future episode.
Okay, yeah, I was like, that seems like a whole lot of stuff to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about how you get paid, pay for being paid, whether it's a content or whether you commission for something like Chicago project. It's a minefield, to say the least. But yeah, the big key is never work for free. And I'm gonna take the opposite stand there from Crystal. Trading skills, that's a minefield, because you can end up with certain things that have happened, especially over the we've seen.
And that's legitimate. That's absolutely legitimate.
But yeah, I think never work for free. Always make sure that you're getting something from the work that like you wouldn't go to your day job, your 9-to-5 job, whatever it is, science working. You wouldn't go to that job because that person is going to say, "Oh yeah, no worries, we'll give you a bike at the." It's understanding that fair trade. If you're working for a trade of something, make sure that the trade that you're working for is actually paying off. I'll build this building for you, and oh yeah, cool, I got a car out of it. But how am I going to feed my family? Understand what we mean by.
So, and then Dave, you wrote this last one.
Yes, I did, and this is something that I came up across when I first started working by myself, collaborating with my solo pitches. The work that you write and the scenario that you pitch something a company and go, yeah, and they're like, yes, cool, right, that's brilliant. Write that for me. Here's your guidelines. Here's your word limit. Here's the style guide. Fit it within all. You do that, and you write 10,000 words, 15, whatever it is they do, and then you don't hear from them for 8 months, and then the thing gets published, and suddenly you're like, oh, it's all come out, and everything that you have written is not there,
or is very
the entire
different.
concept. It's different to how you present it. The story and things are there. Expect what you have written, especially working for a company who have IP, other licenses within it. expect your words to never be precious about what you have written, especially if you are working major, whether it's darkness, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons. The story that you write is not the story is going to be and be okay. And I think that was one of the biggest things that I had to when I got into, I suppose. Not you can write a story and they'll take that idea and then change everything about it, but keep the idea. But a lot of the I think that's a really don't be.
All right. And so, Carrie, you may not have advice, but maybe something that you took away from this whole, like, really lengthy conversation.
I feel like I have to process it. Like, I need to go into a small room and be like, think and absorb and figure out, lay it all out so it makes sense.
So we did plan this for what, like an hour? And what are we like?
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're at 2.5 hours right now.
I think the only thing I got is the main thing is chase it down. I think is what the main takeaway I have at this moment is that if you have questions, talk to your developer. If you have got an idea, call the company. A lot of it seems like to chase it down, and then
you have
after
to be
that,
an active participant.
Yeah, you can't wait to be discovered.
Talk to people.
Not all of us fall into it.
Talk to people.
Yep.
Just be proactive. I think is a word.
Yep.
And it's not just proactive to the company; it's your work. Make it happen.
All right. So, thank you guys both for coming on the first podcast and for staying on for so long. I apologize for the length. I'm going to have
Hey, you two are fine. It's still midday for you two.
I know it's really late for you, David. I'm so sorry.
It's not yet midnight.
Oh, well, that's good. Okay, so I'm going to have both of you share your social medias. I'll share my social media and then closing. So, Carrie, why don't you first?
Okay, I have a blog because everybody told me I was really funny and I had to put it all in one place so they could read it. It's called Baby Carrots. I suppose I should give the address, right? baby-carrots.blog. You can read all about my ridiculous life with my ridiculous children. That's all.
All right, David?
Just working out So other than on Darker Days Radio with Dark Side of Darker Days, I have my own actual play streaming service that is a little bit weird at the moment because I have really bad internet. Do actual plays over on the Drunken Storyteller. You can find lots of indie RP with a load of really fun, amazing people. We just did The Shadow of Mog. That's actual really big actual over there. On the other side of that, there's a podcast of folklore. It's mainly a podcast. Me on media when and if I'm drunken. I'm really bad at social media, and you can also find me on drive-through a lot of the 12 to.
Yeah. All right, and you can find
who are you,
me.
Crystal?
You can find
you?
me. You can find more information about me at thegeekypanda.com. You can also find me on social media at bodyandsoul152 or at thegeekypanda.com or at thegeekypanda. Depending on which social media. If you also have questions, I will leave my email as well in the show notes, but you can email me at crystal.m.mazur@gmail.com, or you can reach out on social media. You can also reach out through the Darker Days Radio email or media or Discord as well. So you can find all of that information. We are Darker Days Radio. Our email is darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. Our Facebook is /darkerdaysradio, at darkerdaysradio at all media. We're on Instagram, Tumblr, on Tabletop, YouTube, and Twitch, and our super fun Discord with a link in the show notes. So please come and...
Chig.
I mean, I am going to identify as a problem for him in JudCon. That's going to happen.
I am so looking for... Can you... Is there a possibility of it being a stream? Because I just want us to interact.
I can't guarantee that we're going to have a stable enough internet, unfortunately, because we're in the stadium for some of it, and the stadium doesn't really have a good internet.
Or just stable enough interaction.
Both. We are going to be recording it, though. It's going to be hilarious.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. All right. But thank you everyone for joining me. I will be having more releases of the podcast episodes after Gen Con. This is the first and only one I'm recording before Gen Con because I like my sanity. Everything else is going to come after Gen Con.
Overrated.
And if you are going to be at Gen Con, please come and find me. I am more than happy to talk with people as long as I'm not headed to an event. And if you are a freelancer or you are looking to freelance, I am hosting a very casual freelancer meetup. It is going to be in the Omni Severn lobby. And it literally, it starts at 7 o'clock on Thursday night, which is Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Ugh. And but you can come at any point. You don't have to come at 7. You don't have to stay the whole time. You can come as you are, whenever you are done with your events or anything like that. Come check in, hang out with us, listen to us tell war stories and funny stories about how art notes can get you into trouble.
If only I could get on a plane and travel.
Amazing. I want to meet you in person so much, David.
We do need to try and get me and Chris and Pete.
Yes. Oh, that'd be so awesome. So,
you know
so
what?
amazing.
Everybody go buy the Darker Days Radio PDFs that we've got out on Drive Through RPG as freelance writers. Support Darker Days Radio, and maybe at some point we can all get together. So me, Chig, Crystal, Mike, Pete, Chris, everybody together. We'll just get together and we can meet somewhere in the world, and you can have an in-person live experience podcast. So go support.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.